Animal Welfare and Handling. This is Chapter 4 at the Handling Facility. So, our basic background on this chapter: when you understand the instincts and the learned behaviors of these livestock, producers can help animals through various activities. Could be vaccination, preg checking, doctoring, ear tagging, branding, whatever it is, with as minimal stress as possible. So we've got tools, we've got strategies that can help this. So this chapter is going to look at some of those tools that we can use with the things we previously learned in Chapter 3 about the point of balance, the flight zone, and then we add the facility into it. And there are any changes or fixes or how we can design something or alter it so we can assist in low stress livestock handling. So livestock handling principles inside corrals and chutes. So if you use some basic principles, you can move livestock efficiently through a small vet processing center or a large meat plant. So problems are normally linked to lack of handler training or flaws in the facility design. Hopefully I can find a video and you can watch for Dr. Grandin. She said that if she could fix all the facilities in the United States, we can cut down on a ton of stress, but she probably can't. So could be things like crowding pigs for prodding cattle. Seems to be not a big deal, but that can cause stress. So again, it's about getting in the mind of those animals so they can understand how neglected little details can make a huge difference on animal handling. So one thing is you got the tub, what they call the crowd pen. Make sure you take that at only half capacity. So cattle, pigs, bison, they've got to have room to turn around. Okay, if sheep are smaller, they can turn around more easy. So when you have a crowd pen, again called the tub sometimes, leading into a single file chute, it should never be loaded more than 50% capacity. And try not ever to take that crowd gate and push the animals with it. Again, they have to be able to turn around to go inside the chute. As I mentioned, sheep are kind of the exception. They tend to be moved in larger groups instead of smaller bunches. If you're moving sheep from a crowd pen into a chute, it's like siphoning water. You don't want to break the flow, especially the follower the leader instinct. So we've talked about using the flight zone to move animals on pasture, but now inside of a chute, and how's that different? So by using the patterns we discussed in the previous chapter, you can use these instincts and behaviors to move animals through a chute system with very minimal difficulty. For example, to move an animal forward in a chute, walk inside the flight zone while going in the opposite direction of desired movement. Simple movement like that is much less stressful than using an electric prod. Try to get them to walk instead of running. So maybe you're too close, maybe you're far away. You just have to balance each individual animal to see what is that point to get them to move, but to move calmly. So this you can see if you're in a single file chute. Okay, so again, you're outside the flight zone. You come in, they're going to stay, but all of a sudden, once you get that point of balance at the shoulder, that animal's going to go forward. And then, of course, you can kind of use that with the following instinct of, oh, that animal goes forward. I'm going to follow them. Oh, I'm going to follow them. And by doing that, you're moving, again, past your point of balance. And if you have to go back around to the front, go outside the flight zone, then come back in. And that's the direction you should go. So again, using that diagram, that's what we can use to move our animals. When the point of balance is crossed, as the handler basically moves in the opposite direction of desired movement, the animals speed up. They typically slow down when the handler walks in the same direction as desired movement. So you need to slow down. Basically, you can stop or start backing up a little bit within that flight zone. So what about a curve chute? Will you take advantage of animals' natural circling ability? So you can use the same thing. Okay, so here's your squeeze chute. That's where we want them to go. So again, we're going outside the flight zone, and then we go into the flight zone. You got their point of balance. Once you walk around that radius, again, you got the same thing. And then when you have to come back, do it all over again. So what that's doing, it's taking advantage of their natural following and circling behavior. So we want to maximize flow for cattle, pigs, whatever it is, in a single file chute system. It requires basically that you wait until the chute is nearly empty before refilling it from the tub or crowd pen. Again, this is going to take advantage of the natural following behavior. So once we get an animal to see in, and they can, eventually we can see that one in front of them, they're going to come in. When you force animals basically into a chute that is nearly full, will cause animals to balk and try to turn back. So we want that crowd pen or the tub system to be more of a passing through pen. We don't want to keep a lot of animals in there. It's always better to keep the flow going instead of having them stop, which again, once they make them turn around and go back to where they came from, which is also that natural behavior. They go and circle back to where they came from. So we're using it sometimes in a positive way, but animals might want to use that circling behavior in a negative way. So your cattle and sheep facilities are going to work best with a rather long single file chute system to use that natural falling behavior. Bison typically need a shorter system as they become more bored when they're just standing, or probably become more agitated. And then again, they might gore another animal in the rear end to get through. So the proper aids we can also use for driving animals. We should never be, a hot shot is kind of your last resort. So a flag or a paddle can be quietly moved along the side of an animal's head. That can be used to turn an animal. Again, it's used only to guide, never to hit them. You could take a 6 to 8 foot long light stick with a plastic bag tugging on the end. It's inexpensive. It works well. But again, don't use the stick and then become too aggressive with it. Just put a bit of pressure in the flight zone, and that helps. They make panels, sort boards, if you will. They work good for pigs. They usually don't like to go through solid panels. The problem is in large facilities, it can become very heavy to carry. They may actually make these solid ones. It's kind of what they call a witch's cape. It's lightweight. It's just a piece of plastic on a pole. It can be made at home, very minimal expense. But again, they typically don't want to go through something they can't see through. But that's not always the case. Some of them will still go through anything. So again, you can see just, use a flag on a flexible pole, or you could have that pole, take the flag off and try a trash bag to it, or, a little sack from a supermarket, something like that. Again, use the electric prod only when everything else fails. There's no other option. You should not be used as your primary driving aid. You should only use it on an animal if it's absolutely refusing to enter a squeeze chute. And when this happens, basically the use of this is preferred over hitting, tail twisting, or even poking an animal, in a sensitive part. The worst place to keep an electric prod is in someone's hands. So keep it where you can easily get to it, but only when they need it. So maybe a truck is stopped to get fuel and notices an animal down. It's safer if they're standing up, but the electric prod could be used to get the animal to stand because they can't open the trailer and get in with them. That's just definitely unsafe. So again, if that's the only option, yes, use it. But for the most points in time, we don't want to use it. So the electrical prods that you use, livestock prods, have the same shocking ability as an electric fence. So the other thing we want to do is poke on the rear end of the animal, not necessarily its anus per se, but on the rear leg of the animal if you have to. No device should ever be used on the rectum, vagina, eyes, ears, nose, udders, or any sensitive part, penis, something like that. So anyone that uses the prod improperly needs to be terminated immediately. If a facility has to use a prod more than 1 to 2 times per 100 head, the problem probably is the facility. So you definitely don't want to use electric prods on sheep or young infant animals either. So here's some more handling tips that we can put out there. Be careful with lone animals. Again, most of these are herd animals or pack animals. They want to stay together. So these animals will tend to panic. They'll injure themselves and people. So never get in a confined space with an agitated lone animal. Number 2, ease squeeze chute entry. Use the movement patterns we discussed earlier to induce cattle into a squeeze chute. It helps eliminate electric prod use. Also give animals time to calm. They're going to be easier to handle. It actually does take about 20 to 30 minutes for them to calm down, but if we give them time, it'll be worth it. But also change the handler position in the crowd pen. If an animal refuses to enter a single file system, try moving to a different position. Don't just resort to, throwing a stick at them, using an electric prod, whatever it is. So we want to measure handling success. So basically people manage things that they measure. So if you can measure it, we can manage it. So you can measure how well animals do just the same way as you measure feed efficiency or rate of gain. It basically prevents people from bringing back old bad habits. So if you do have the book, there's page 59 to 62 has examples that can be used to determine how well animals and handlers are doing. It's not so important that if you don't have the book, not a big deal. But these are some of those. Again, this is a cattle transport audit form. So they can say, what's percentage of cattle that slip or fall. Percentage of cattle that walk or trot on or off the truck, percentage of cattle that strike objects, they run into things, percentage of cattle prodded with an electric prod, and again, that can be scored. It can be done on a truck, it can be done on an individual pin, whatever it is. And here's another page of that report: prompt unloading, stocking density, truck cleanliness, truck maintenance, and if they passed or failed if you're actually doing an audit. There are sometimes some facility fixes that can alleviate animal stress. You'd be amazed at how little changes in a facility can influence handling. It could be as simple as a contrasting color floor mat or a daily patch of sunshine in the main alley that causes an animal to stop and not move. Okay? So not only do we want to move them slowly, but we want to allow them to investigate these little things if we can't remove them. So that's when time becomes an issue. Large packing facility, time is a huge issue. So again, we want to eliminate those areas that make the animals stop. Blocking vision can be used to help keep animals calm. There's a bunch of studies that show that blindfolding with a completely opaque cloth can have calming effects on cattle because they don't fear what they can't see. Out of sight, out of mind. When we get for cattle, sheep, bison, and deer, having solid sides are added to open-sided fencing to block their vision to prevent seeing distractions. So Dr. Andrew will discuss being in a meat plant and using corrugated cardboard on top of a restrainer to keep the animals from rearing up. It blocked their vision, and it worked very well, especially on animals that have very little human contact. So you'll see some of these when you watch some of the videos. So definitely solid size and lighted ways. Any material we can use to create vision barriers, provided it's not loose or flapping, is going to be important for us. Whether it's sheet metal, plywood, planks, old conveyor belt, they're all commonly used. The problem is, as long as they don't have any kind of jagged edges or something that now they can injure livestock or animals, and again, if they're flapping, they become more of a distraction and can scare those animals. So making sure not only solidly built, but solidly attached. Lighting is definitely a big issue. All species are sensitive to illumination in handling facilities. They also have a strong tendency to move from a dimly lit to a brighter area as long as the light is not shining directly in their eyes. Okay, deer in the headlights look. Okay, also the wrong lighting can ruin the performance of a well-designed facility. If you have a building enclosed with walls, make sure they have skylights or plastic side panels to let some light in. At night, lamps can be used to attract animals into buildings, trucks, or even chutes. Even with light, though, animals can balk when entering a building where it is darker inside than outdoor daylight. So that has to be evaluated and actually see during different times of the day what is the difference from outside to inside. Animals typically do not approach a blinding light, so squeeze chutes and loading ramps should be oriented so they don't face into the sun during handling times. No matter when it is, dusk, dawn, make sure you're not east and west facing those loading ramps. A loading facility that faces east in the early morning will be detrimental. No effect during the midday or the evening though. So we also want to recognize any distractions that would cause balking. When animals fail to enter an area or balk, it is normally because of a small distractions that humans don't notice. It could be a shadow, a reflection of water, a movement ahead. Those are just a few examples that could cause it. So a dairy cow, they may walk over a drain because he or she does it, or in this case, cow, she does it every day. Another cow, it's her first time, she might balk at it. So again, look for the facility and see if there are small things that might make an animal stop. And that means you got to get down to eye level with those animals and see what they see. Those animals don't have eyes that are 6 foot or 5'5", maybe a little bit, 5 foot tall, 4.5 foot tall, whatever it is. Pigs even shorter. So get down and see what they're seeing. Anytime you have to restrain an animal, livestock can become severely stressed and agitated in a conventional squeeze chute. Typically you're getting too deep into their flight zone by the people around. So animals should only walk or trot into the restator. If they ram into that head gate, they can injure their shoulder or neck pretty easily, and animals have died from it before. So as soon as the animal starts to enter, you're starting to put a little bit of pressure slowly and not suddenly to catch the animal running in. So slow, steady pressure, sides first, then the head gate. Cattle will seldom resist when pressure is applied from the apparatus that is slow and optimal in terms of pressure. So optimal pressure is basically the ideal amount of restraint pressure on each individual animal. Obviously, we know they're all going to be a little different. So that's why not doing it too fast and having too much pressure is better for the actual whole population of a herd or a group. So it has to balance between an animal being restrained and not causing it pain or discomfort. So you'll know too much pressure is going to cause that animal to vocalize or strain to breathe. So if that happens, slowly lessen the pressure. And then a sudden release may cause the animal to get excited. Oh, I'm free. Well, wait a minute, I'm really not. So some people do the wrong thing by applying more pressure when the animal struggles, and that's the opposite of what they should do. On the flip side, though, you got too little pressure during restraint, the animals may be able to move too much, making any procedures you're doing to them more difficult and thus agitate the animal. So again, the correct amount of pressure over a broad area can have a calming effect. The best squeeze chutes typically have sides that close evenly together. It means you have pressure coming in or the sides move in from both sides. They do make some squeeze chutes that only come in from one side. And they may make the animal think they're going to tip over. And if you think you're going to tip over, what's going to happen? You're going to panic. So we also got to think about the size of that squeeze chute, from a small 400-pound calf to a 1,700-pound bull. It's got to be able to be adjustable for the size of the animal. So here are some principles of low stress animal restraint. Again, block the vision with solid sides or louvers to prevent them from seeing things in their flight zone. Block the vision of an escape route, but allow animals to see a lighted area ahead. So we don't think they can get out, but let them see that there is a way to get out. So again, slow, steady pressure applied by a restraining device. A device must have pressure, but not enough to induce pain. Cattle is typically calmer if they can see another animal within 3 feet of them. Install a solid roof for bison, again, because they're going to jump and rear. Use quiet handling in the chutes leading up to the squeeze chute. Just walk in and out, don't run. Non-slip flooring. Animals slip, they panic. Even if it's a little slip, they're going to panic, and that increases stress. The retainers should support the animal in a balanced position. Don't let them be off balance. They think they're going to tip over, they're going to panic. And again, that restraint device should not pinch the animal, should not cause them any pain or discomfort. So adjusting your squeeze chute and restraint devices, you can only use a complete squeeze chute for cattle and bison that are not chained for head restraint. That's going to be difficult. Your hydraulic chutes should have a pressure release valve to be adjusted to prevent excessive pressure. So too much pressure, we note, can have some detrimental impacts, including ruptured diaphragm. It could even lead to broken bones. If the animal vocalizes, if the cattle they moo or bellow, when the valve lever is held down, the pressure is too high. So adjusting the pressure release valve to the maximum pressure the chute will exert. When it reaches this pressure, the hydraulic fluid stops and flows back into the reservoir. So it gets to the point, no more can be applied. The pressure release valve should be set so it automatically stops right before the cattle start to strain. Okay, so it's going to take some playing with it, but it can be done. The operator's got to be trained to slow down the animals with the side also before getting to the gates. So you kind of slow down their movement with the side gates, and then basically you don't want them to slam into the head gate. So big thing is sheep also might not vocalize for pain, which makes handling sheep a little more difficult. On the opposite, you got pigs. They're always going to be grunting or doing something, so they are very expressive. They're going to squeal with minimal distress. So an occasional squeal or grunt needs to be ignored. If you have a continuous loud one, that's what we got to pay attention to. So some vets are also going to prefer a chute that does not pinch the feet together at the bottom. So if you have a manually operated squeeze chute and restraint, they need careful adjustment too, not only the pneumatic ones. So your latchets and ratchet locks on a squeeze chute, if they're a manual one, should be kept well maintained. Make sure they're oiled, but friction type ones should never be oiled. Depends on if they need it or required it or not. So then if you have issues, you can troubleshoot any handling problems. So try to determine what's the cause of difficulty. And so these are just some examples. So any one or more of these could happen. Maybe you have insufficient time to calm down scared, excited animals. If they're scared or excited, it takes 20 to 30 minutes to calm them down. Facility design flaws: if you have a dead end chute, if it looks like a dead end, they're not going to go. They've got to see a way to get out. Okay. Maybe you have incorrect lighting or chute entrance that is too dark. Maybe a small distraction, a coat hanging on a fence, a reflection on a puddle, whatever it is. If you have too many pigs, cattle, bison, whatever it is in a crowd pen, that can cause some issues. Again, 50% full sheep, they're quite smaller, they can move around quite readily. So again, troubleshooting of handler issues. Handlers get the animals agitated, excited, or scared. It's going to make handling more difficult. Again, animal temperament we know can be caused by flighty, excitable genetics, so that's just going to be an issue, and can we train them? Slick floors, they cause them to slip, they panic. If we have a handler who moves on foot for livestock that are used to horses, that could be different, or if they're used to a foaler and all of a sudden here's a horse. Also, if you have insufficient exposure to people, again, it's about getting them trained before they get into any of these larger, more stressful operations. And you have a handler who stands in front of the point of balance and pokes them poke their basically rear. As I mentioned before, it's confusing. You're standing in front of them, telling them to move back, but you're poking them with a shot in the rear to tell them to go forward. So we can't do that to animals. We can't confuse them. Again, they don't have that higher order brain thinking like we do as humans. Alright, that's the end of Chapter 4. Complete any items in this module in Canvas, your quiz, discussion, and move to the next one when appropriate.